Thank you for being here. We have the amazing challenge of keeping you excited before the cocktail and before wrapping up this second incredible day. So thank you for joining us. My name is Aura Cifuentes. I'm part of the investments team at Co-Develop. And before that, I was a civil servant in Colombia. I worked almost 10 years on digital government, open data, open government, public policy. So I'm really excited to be moderating this panel with true DPI champions, old friends, and people that truly believe in DPI and how can we strengthen our governments and how can we strengthen public service delivery. So really excited to have this conversation with you guys. Just before introducing our panelists, I would like to give a quick overview of what we call the LAC region, and so we can all have like a complete understanding of this region. So the LAC region comprises 33 countries and thousands of islands, and maybe you already know that, but 20 countries in Latin America and 13 countries in the Caribbean, with a population of over 150 million people. So I think that having these numbers and this context is relevant when we're talking about DPI. You all probably know that this is a diverse region. In general, culturally, it's a very diverse region, but also in the digital landscape, we are really diverse. We have countries that are more digitally advanced, and there are others, well, we still have gaps on DPI, on promoting DPGs. So having this conversation, it's really interesting because we want to highlight local and national initiatives. So that being said, the objective of this panel is to explore strategies, to share the challenges that we're facing, to also highlight the opportunities and the innovations that we are seeing in different countries. And we want also to highlight and to explain how the multi-stakeholder collaboration play a huge role in this region. So let me introduce the speakers, because we have different sectors and different country representation. So Julia Diaz, she leads the Code for Development and the Development Data Partnership Initiatives at the IDB, promoting the adoption of open source software and the use of data for development across Latin America and the Caribbean. She also supports IDB sectors in innovating through open innovation and the development of digital solutions to enhance public policy design and execution. And actually, this panel is co-hosted by Co-Develop and IDB. Armando Mansueta, he is currently the Vice Minister for Public Innovation and Digital at the Ministry of Public Administration in the Dominican Republic. He's a software developer with 12 years of experience in government and finance, with a focus on innovation, cybersecurity, and public policy. Before his current role, he was the Dominican Republic's Digital Government Director. And between 20 and 2023, between 20 and 2023, and between 2023 and 2024, he was the Digital Transformation Director at the Ministry of Economy. So a real public servant. Vinicius de Faria Silva, he is a Digital Technologies Advisor at Brazil's Ministry of Management and Innovation in Public Services. He has over 24 years of experience in digital technologies, innovation ecosystems, and governance of large-scale digital infrastructures. He has played a fundamental role in Brazil's digital modernization, including cloud computing regulations and the application of machine learning in government services. And last but not least, Dan Abadi, he's a digital leader across public and private sectors. In 2024, he joined the Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, CDPI, as a senior technical advisor focusing on the design and implementation of DPI globally. From 2020 to 2023, Dan led the LAC efforts for public digital, overseeing digital transformation projects for organizations such as the IDB, CAF, and the World Bank. But before that, for almost 4 years, as Argentina's Undersecretary of Digital Government, he advised the President on digital economic issues and led the development of an initiative called Mi Argentina Platform, the world's first legal digital driver's license, and the citizen's digital wallet. So they're not only advocates, but they've been implementing DPI projects. So let me start the discussion. So Julia, I would like to start with you so you can briefly present the IDB's role and also to provide the overview of the region and the state of DPI in different countries. And I would like just to say that at CoDev we are really excited because we're working with IDB on rapid deployment pilots in different countries. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tara. And so just to give a brief context of what the IDB is, we are the main source of development finance for Latin America and the Caribbean. We work with 26 countries in the region, focusing on reducing poverty, addressing climate change, and bolstering sustainable growth. And I'm very happy to say that it's really hard to talk about what the IDB is doing in terms of DPI in 2 minutes because we're doing a lot throughout different teams at the bank. We are supporting countries to implement digital IDs, digital wallets, data sharing programs, digital payments, and we have a framework of support that includes support for countries to build institutional capacity and governance to implement those programs, the proper regulatory environment and for DPI adoption, building digital talent, and building tech infrastructure and solutions. Within the open source environment, so I lead the open source initiative at the IDB. We are focused on building, curating, and supporting the implementation of open source within the 26 countries. I'm very happy to say that we started focusing on supporting implementation just in the last 3 years, and by country demand. So country started to ask the IDB for open source first operations, and that's where we came in with technical capacity. And now, as Aura said, we're really happy to partner with CoDevelop to support the rapid implementation of use cases in countries. And we were talking to Vinicius yesterday, right? We are in the Stone Age of DPI, so there is so much to do and grow together, and we're very happy to be leading this effort in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Thank you, Julia. And this actually leads me to the next questions to Armando, Vinicius, and Dan, because I want to ask them the same question regarding the strategic areas that we should be focused on in the LAC region for advancing DPI for the next year. And I would like to start with you, Armando, because as Julia mentioned, we're trying to focus on the use case, what the country needs, and the Dominican Republic, it's promoting a remarkable initiative called Carpeta Ciudadana, but you're also promoting regulation, public policy on DPI. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what's happening in your country, and maybe also like it's not only the use case, but the whole ecosystem orchestration that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like you mentioned, the region is it's a very interesting place because there are many things happening. Even though we have like two velocities, like we have countries that are more advanced than others, but nonetheless, every nation is advancing at its own pace and is creating amazing stuff, no matter the level of development that they have. And it's important for everyone to see what's going on in Latin America. When it comes to the Dominican perspective, like you said, we've been into the DPI business for a while, since we started implementing X-Road back in 2021, sorry. And then we started working with trust services and ID services as well. So in that regard, I think in order to improve Carpeta Ciudadana and other projects, The main priorities, I think, should be working with data governance, with data management, as a way to identify breaches that we currently have on data quality, and of course, the handling of private data and personal data. That's the one that should be part of Carpeta Ciudadana, because it's the one that the citizen needs in order for them to access services. While on the other hand, working on close the gaps we have on legislation and regulation when it comes to accepting these kinds of digital credentials as real and proper ID, because they are, but they are not necessarily recognized as such by certain authorities, by some institutions in the private sector, such as the banking institutions, and it's something that should be worked on. On the other hand, we should also be working on improving well, not just the digital literacy, but also access to financial services, how we can use DPIs to foster financial inclusion, because one of the main aspects of what drives the digital transformation is the access to payment systems as a mean to reduce cash and to reduce informality in the nation. So, like, providing access to these sort of services will also help us out into fostering a more equal society, into a more even digital development for the nation, and it's something that definitely should be working on in the coming years. And there's, of course, which is something more of a regional level, how we can approach the regional community, the Latin American community, on devising some sort of regional standards that will let us create cross-border digital services, from trust services, for interoperability, for payments, and many others. So it's something that eventually we should try to find a ways to integrate ourselves into some sort, not necessarily in the same way as the European market has integrated into a single digital market, but something that at least let us exchange certain information for the improvement of commerce, for the improvement of cross-border data transfer, for data protection and others, that should be able to let us have a more integrated Latin American region.
Thank you, Armando. Vinicius, I would love to hear your perspective, and especially because I've been hearing through the whole summit, Brazil is a different animal, in a good way, of course, but it's remarkable what you're doing and the journey on digital transformation. Last week was the UN General Assembly in New York, and I had the privilege to hear your minister. And actually, I was there when Brazil officially committed to the 15/5 initiative. So what are your thoughts and your perspective on this?
Yes. I could say that Brazil has got a history of digital infrastructures. For example, PIX, which is kind of famous right now in this DPI context. It's a kind of, there is a predecessor from PIX that has been working for 30 years, you know. I mean, PIX was not, something that came up from nothing. We have been working this Brazilian payment systems for 30 years, you know, and definitely it would kind of, it helped a lot to kind of make PIX possible. And so I think this is a good example. We have got some other examples in Brazil of digital infrastructures, which actually we didn't know that the name was digital infrastructure or something like that. We used it to call it platforms, digital platforms, and so on. And actually now we're trying to understand the digital public infrastructure more as a discipline. I mean, something that we can kind of, we know that we have made some platforms which has got some characteristics of digital public infrastructures, and we want to kind of converge to some profile of digital public infrastructure. And to be very honest, as Julia said, I mean, we feel we are at the very beginning of this more discipline-oriented approach, you know. I mean, we need to start to get planning and to come up with a strategy for DPI, because we have got a lot of opportunities right now, both sharing what we have and also leveraging DPGs, for example, the Indian ones. And so I think this is pretty much the scenario. I mean, it's like we understand what we have done, and understand the current scenario and try to plan ahead what we can do from now, and then to maximize, potentialize all these principles and all this mindset that we are kind of very, adherent to it, and we support it.
Perfect. Thank you, Vinicius. And then, what are your thoughts, and maybe just feel free maybe to add your thoughts on what you're perceiving from CDPI, because you're giving technical assistance to many countries in the LAC region.
Thank you, Aura. Hi, all. So we've been working from CDPI on the Latin American, the Caribbean region, 36 countries. It's a diverse region. We got huge economies like Brazil, and we got tiny, tiny economies like Virgin Islands. So that wide range. And if you see the evolution of digital transformation in the region, you can see it like it's a past, present, future. You got people that have, like myself, been in the past. They got new generations like Vinicius or Armando that are the present. And when they leave, they're gonna have the future leaders building on top of what they built. And that range it's not a greenfield. There's a lot of opportunities in different countries where a DPI approach of building small building blocks just to move forward countries with 200 years of history, and that's 200 years of bureaucracy and traditions and rules, and transforming the entire administration. It's a money countries don't have. We have a region that has an advanced economy in some parts, but also has a lot of informality, a lot of poverty, a lot of kids dropping schools. So that idea of trying to balance and give access, DPI can do that. We are working with several countries in the region, along with the IDB co-development in the islands of the Caribbean, to help them move forward in some projects. We're working with Trinidad and Tobago. But also the region is moving forward by itself. And you see great things into interoperability in cross-border. So what we are seeing in this region is an opportunity to improve not only people's life through making government better, but also making the economy better on different parts with simpler addition of building blocks.
Any focus or strategy or areas that you think we should be promoting for next year, Dan? For any strategic areas or focus that you think are relevant for the LAC region?
So they're different. The easiest or the low-hanging fruit could be verified credentials, because most of the governments has the chance of have any type of database and transform education certificates in something that could be verified. And we had Pramod speaking about this today in the morning, and Netherlands was speaking this yesterday. And you see examples like Argentina that moved forward in that, but we are working on that in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a huge discussion of identity. Yeah. If you speak with the IDB will tell you there's a lot of countries in the region that they don't have an identity system for their citizens, including Brazil, and you're working on that. So those things are really good. They're really great examples of payments like PICs. There's a lot of opportunity into interoperability. And if you see building blocks, for example, just today, the Uruguayan government announced that you can use the single sign-on of the Brazilian government in the Uruguayan government system. So that, cross-border integration that has been working, and it's a building idea that started 7 years ago, and now it's been materialized on using your credentials as a Brazilian in your neighbor, which is Uruguay. It's super interesting. It's maybe the first in the world, and it's being published today.
Yeah, thank you. As you've been noticing, all of us, we think that we are a diverse region, and we repeat this all over, every time that we can, because we came from this region, those countries, and the LAC region has mainly democracies. We have a few authoritarian regimes, but we know that every 5-6 years, we are not only diverse already, but every 5-6 years, when governments change, many things change, especially for DPI. So we've been having these discussions all over the summit, and when we're saying this, the LAC region is diverse, we always said, so the ecosystem is relevant. We need to have a strong ecosystem, regionally, but also in every country. And that means we need to work with civil society, with the private sector, local and national governments at the same time. So I want to maybe ask you about the regional ecosystem and what do you think about that? And Julia and Dan, you have both that perspective from your roles, from your organizations. So I would like to ask you, where, like we already said, there are like opportunities and also challenges for the LAC countries, but what is the key role that the regional ecosystem could play on advancing DPI? You already know what are the official networks, the informal networks, the communities of practice. So what do you think about that regional ecosystem, and what could we do to strengthen that ecosystem that already exists? Julia, maybe.
I can start. Okay.
Yeah.
So I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I've been testing it out with different people in the conference and asking what they think. So this is a compiled version. I think the first thing is that we have been focusing a lot as the ecosystem on the technology, and the technology is the easiest part. And I understand it makes sense. You want to see how it works, you know, you need proof of concepts, you need pilots to get the political will, to get governments to understand how it works, but then to scale, you have a new set of challenges and priorities that you need to focus on. You need the legal, regulatory, and governance environments for the DPI to scale up. You need political will, and I feel that a lot of times the ecosystem say, okay, now go and do that and tell us when it's ready. So I would like to see the ecosystem a little bit more involved in supporting countries with everything else that is related to DPI implementation. And I do think here cross-border knowledge transfer is key. So there is a lot of copy-paste on regulations. You see a regulation that works out and a lot of other countries just followed. And here I think campaigns like 15.5 are key to just get countries together and say, hey, what do you think about regulating your digital wallet? I don't know. And creating those things. I think the second thing is, especially Latin America, we are in a brown field, right? There's a lot of legacy systems. And I really liked what Liv said last panels, that she said, do you think about the millions of trains that I have when you're building your open standard, open source train tracks? Because you have to take into consideration the legacy systems. So when developing the offer, you know, the vendors for governments, you have to take into consideration government needs, right? And the last one, I think that the dream scenario for governments is to have a really competitive vendor ecosystem of partner implementers and solutions maintainers to guarantee long-term sustainability. It doesn't matter if something is open source. If in your region you only have one vendor that can implement it, this is vendor lock-in. So how do you guarantee a competitive ecosystem of vendors to give countries choice to, you know, push the barrier a little bit in the market side?
Excellent, thank you. Back to you, Dan. What do you think about this regional ecosystem?
Thank you. I think first, I think IDP plays a great role in the region to sustain programs through transitions as well as like the UNDP missions that they are in all the countries, and they try to shape the conversation on that, especially when you see countries that were really advanced and then there was a transition and they basically abandoned that. I think the main challenge is, yes, diversity on vendors. You need to have a healthy ecosystem and a healthy community. Your capacity is your community. If you have a community small, you're not going to scale. It happens everywhere. And on the other part, the great challenge is people. It's paying for people. This is an unfair game. Latin America is a developing region. 2/3 of the budgets go to health, education, and social aid. So technology offices need to compete with the other ministers for money. And so it's hard. And that's when a DPI approach comes in to help governments move faster, because at the end of the day, time is running up on administration and they need to show up things. I think those challenges, taking that as a community approach, could be easier. Doing a public-private initiative, that makes simpler, and especially creating case studies and successful stories from neighbors also influence a lot, especially in a region where 80% of the region has a common language, which is Spanish, and then you got clustered some islands of the Caribbean in English, and you got Brazil, which is its own continent. So it's easy to maybe have a common touch points.
And we also have Portuñol, which is a mixed. Would you say, and maybe this is a question for the four panelists, would you say that we have a DPI ecosystem?
Yes and no. Yes, because there are many countries that have implemented some DPIs, even though they don't call it and recognize them as such. And no, because all the work that the region has been doing is not being that integrated that much. I mean, we have integration mechanisms such as TREC-HEALC, but we haven't done a deep dive regarding this specific topic on how we can, together as a region, come forth with a set of DPIs that have Latin American characteristics and could be implemented as such by any regions. Because even though we have different levels of digitalization, our problems are mostly the same. No matter how big our economy is, we'll still have the same issues. We're still facing poverty, inequality, problems with healthcare access, payments, and the like. So, like having this space for Latin American countries to actually start thinking on how DPIs could help us out to solve these structural problems that we as a region currently have could lead to very interesting things. So I think it's something that we should start taking into consideration, and perhaps, I don't know, start working on such a forum.
What do you think, Vinicius?
No, I don't think that we have got an ecosystem in Latin America yet, in Caribbean. My perception is that Bangalore is like everything is in Bangalore, you know? I mean, it's like an imbalance, you know? I mean, you have got, I mean, a lot of things, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of DPGs in Bangalore. This is why I'm going to Bangalore on Friday. I mean, there's no option, you should go. And, but the challenge that actually we are going through now in Brazil with our initiative of verifiable credentials, digital infrastructure, is how we can, it deals exactly what you were asking me. I mean, how we can take Bangalore to Brazil, you know, to support our initiative. Because
Brazil is our India.
Yeah, actually, how we are simulating this coming to India, you know. But actually, I mean, we would like to have, for example, these partners and everyone and people which kind of are prepared, that have capacities to work with this in Brazil, of course. But I mean, as Julia said, we understand we are in the day zero, you know. Yeah. So I mean, it's part of the challenge, I think, and. But I think it's normal. I mean, it's maybe now we are starting to get to need this. I mean, to realize that we need this, and to think maybe with these Indian partners, for example, and Estonian partners, how to get, I mean, this to replicate this somehow these ecosystems in other parts of the world. I mean, it's very interesting challenge, I think. But I don't think we have got this yet, I think.
Great. Julia?
I don't think we can look at Latin America and the Caribbean as an isolated region. I think Latin America and the Caribbean is more and more integrated into international ecosystem of DPI, which is amazing. I think India and different countries in Europe have been very kind in sharing what they have done with Latin America and the Caribbean, and we're starting to develop our own inspirations. So for sure, Brazil is a huge inspiration for the region. The Dominican Republic is a huge inspiration. I didn't mention in the beginning because I woke up sick. I'm in a lot of medications, and I don't even know my name, so I forget a lot of things. But one of the rapid deployment pilots that we're doing with Co-Develop is in the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic is building open source policies in the country because they want to share what they are doing with other countries in the region in Spanish, which is amazing and very needed. So I think countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are starting to lead the DPI ecosystem, which I think is amazing. I think there is a huge gap of vendors in the region, but I also think that we're more and more integrated in the international ecosystem, which is amazing.
Yeah. Dan?
Like Pramod, I'm going to be provocative. The answer is no. We're getting there. I think that having a DPI ecosystem without adoption means nothing. We got all the condiments to have it, right? We got a huge open source community. We got a huge civic society community, a civic tech community, universities, private ecosystem. We got public ecosystem with governments trying to do stuff with 20 times less money than the most advanced nation and successfully doing it. We got human resources, we got talent. So all the common events are there. I think we are moving forward into it. And we have a lot of challenges also for our population in the region that we need to cover first. But yes, and I think, again, this is a community approach. It's governments, it's private sector getting involved in the TPI discussion. It's Brazil leading the G20 and setting the agenda so a South African government can pick it up. It's the IDB, CAF, or other institution in the region that's working on supporting countries. It's philanthropics, but and also it's civic society at that point. So that idea of community, at least for a region, is what's going to make that DPI ecosystem. But today, as Vinicius said, it's like day 0 or 3-4 maybe.
Yes, thank you. And I wanted to ask that question, even if it's like the obvious one, because we've been discussing that in the LAC region, we already have strong communities on open data, open government, digital government, open source, you mentioned that, Dan, civic tech, gov tech, fintech. So we have, even like in some cases, formal communities, formal networks, governance, on those networks and communities of practice. Sometimes they are actually within the government. So I think that one of the challenges is to understand how the DPI umbrella could find the synergies with those agendas and with those communities. Because I agree, like we don't have a DPI ecosystem, but still like maybe the same definition in the LAC region of what should be that ecosystem or that community in terms of DPI. So I will, I want to ask a last question and maybe have a couple of minutes to open the floor to the audience if you have questions for our panelists. And I would like to move to talk about local capacity. I think that everyone that has been in government knows how difficult it is to have civil servants train on DPI. And again, I said one of the challenges with the government's transition is to make the DPI project sustainable. So I would like to ask our two current civil servants here about that. Like, how are your governments building local capacity to support these projects? What are the challenges? What are the recommendations for other countries? Vinicius.
Yes, actually, we know that we need to start building these capacities because, I mean, we have some kind of excitement right now about DPI, you know. It's from the last year's UN, I mean, promotion of DPI and so on. Then the first step for us in terms of going through the real DPI concept was getting some people to Bangalore some months ago. And now I am going to Bangalore for 1 more week to advance our initiatives. So I think that, I mean, we are trying to come up with a DPI as a discipline. I mean, it's as I said, I mean, it's a new way of read the digital government and the digital economy, and we understand that it makes sense. And at the first moment, it looks too audacious, but I mean, now we are confident that it makes sense. And so we are at the very beginning, and we need to kind of come up with some kind of strategy. And actually, we don't have even resources nowadays to work with DPI because there is no DPI office, for example, you know. I'm trying with my boss to get some people to help me work out on this because I mean, it's too heavy. So we have a long road ahead. I mean, we need first to convince people that DPI is not just a nice thing, something very, oh, it's cool. Okay, but we need people to work with DPI. I mean, there are a lot of work to do, to get investment, to work on architectures, to plan roadmaps, you know. So somehow it intersects with some kind of system architecture or enterprise architecture function, but actually it's not exactly this. And I guess that the organizations will need to decide, I mean, where DPI will fit in my structure, you know. And I don't think IT is the best place. I mean, I think that although I think IT is important, I don't think technology is as easy as sometimes you guys say, but I don't think that IT is the right place to be. So this is one of the things that we need just to discuss, I mean, where it's going to be this DPI office, you know? And so let's come up with a strategy, a DPI strategy. Let's plan how we will share peaks with other countries. We will plan how we will leverage Mozipi or leverage other DPGs to improve our systems, our services, our infrastructures, you know. So, I mean, it's just the beginning, you know. But definitely we need awareness. I mean, people understand what is DPI. We need to understand that it's serious. I mean, it needs efforts, you know. I mean, it's not just, oh, it's nice and okay. No, we need to work hard, you know. And I think this is the stage that we are now. I mean, to kind of convince that it makes sense to invest, for example, in having people focused on this.
What about you? Your thoughts?
Well, I agree 100% with what Vinicius said. I mean, capacity building is one of the major challenges that we as a country currently have, not just on the technical side, because getting good developers is a struggle, not just for the Dominican Republic, but also for all governments around the world even. But also from a policy level perspective, because most of the political actors that have a say regarding DPIs doesn't necessarily understand what this concept is. And that's even truer, for example, when it comes to the ministries of finances or any of the agencies that has to do with that, the central banks, even though most of them run something akin to a digital public infrastructure, they don't even know they do that. So under that perspective, we have to be at least a bit more creative on how we can start devising these strategies, and that shouldn't be not just giving technical training to developers and the technical staff on institutions, but also how we can make the decision makers to understand this so they can better support it and provide adequate funding and allows the technical folks that are running the digital side of the administration gets the resources they need for them to implement properly their strategies they're devising. Because if we don't have that kind of support and that kind of understanding, then most of our plans will just remain on paper and nothing will happen at the end.
And on that note, just last question, how are you training your civil servants on this? It's just like, do you have like, it's like a learning by doing thing, or
Actually,
universities are involved, or how is?
Actually, we don't have a formal training program yet, but we have been thinking about this. I think it's something that will come up soon. I guess, I hope. And again, we need money to do this. We need resources, you know. So I mean, it's another budget. So we should first figure out. I mean, who is going to pay this? You know, it's IT. It's the other areas. I mean, who is going to be the sponsor, and we will kind of pay the bill, you know? So what we are doing now, it's engaging some people, some more strategic people, like we took 50 people to Bangalore. I mean, huge commission.
Of civil servants, right?
Yeah. And very, diverse profiles and so on. And this is the way that we thought that we could kind of try to, start to make it happen. And so I think now we are getting a little bit more mature in terms of, okay, we are getting a better vision of the future, of what this means, and so that we can think about how to approach the civil servants, you know. I think it's going to happen very soon, but it's maturing, I think.
Yeah. Well, basically the same. We are thinking on creating programs for training non-technical staff from the administration on how to do rapid deployments on DPI, or how to implement them, and of course, going from 0 to 1. We still haven't figured out how that would work, because we also have other needs. For example, getting developers, and that's also separate formation that needs to be done in tandem with the one concerning DPIs. But it's something that we're thinking about it, how we'll run it, possibly using the institution, the Institute for Training Civil Servants, but we're still figuring out how that would work, if partnering with universities or other private institutions that do academic stuff could work, but still thinking and figuring out how that would work. But it's something that we definitely should be doing as soon as possible for us to have the resources that we need in the near term.
Good. Dan, Julia, you want to add something on this local capacity challenge?
I think it's super important. Most countries in Latin America has an institution for their public employees and support, and basically there's a need for the creation of content in Spanish to move forward, and in Portuguese to do this, because one struggle we see in Latin America and the Caribbean, it's like all our content is in English. And some of us try to speak English, but most of us don't. And that's a limitation and a barrier. It's a barrier for understanding DPIs, it's a barrier to understanding DPGs. It's hard, and the way to expand this is cultural fit. That's how it works. So I think that if us as a community don't start creating more content in different languages, will be hard as a community to push forward DPI.
I agree. Julia, no?
Well, I'm happy to reinforce the language barrier in every sense, from case studies to documentation on the implementation of, let's have MOSEP in Spanish, in Portuguese, in French. I think language is a huge barrier. And let's have vendors that can talk to the government in their own language. But yes, I am very educated. I don't know.
Perfect. No. I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of minutes. And I would like to open the floor to the audience. Is there any question? Go ahead. I don't know, do we have mics or like, you can just, yeah, perfect, thank you.
Tá ótimo, tá ótimo.
No, we have a question, but it's like, or maybe you just can stand up and then Caro? Yeah.
You mean in terms of ecosystem? Do you want to start?
What are the key stakeholders?
Yeah, do you want me to repeat the question? I'm not sure if I I can repeat the question, if I remember the question completely. I know the question, but yes, I think that yeah, your question is what we can do, right? I mean, what? Actually, I think it's we see a lot of people interested in this topic global-wide. I mean, throughout the world. I mean, investment people and non-profit organizations and multilateral organizations. I mean, it's clear that there are a lot of people interested in joining this and make this happen. And I think it's going. I mean, we are learning. I mean, it's for example, no profit is a different I mean model for the government in general. I mean, it's not very usual for us to deal with some kind of support from non-profit organizations. So it's a little bit. It takes time to the government understands the model, how it works, and if it's risky or not for the government. So it's not that easy. It's not our day by day. And when we talk about these multilateral organizations like UN and so on, I mean, these are easier forums to kind of to stick, to join. We are already involved with them, and they support us a lot. Like CDPI has been being very important for us in Brazil, for example, because they have the two Argentinian guys which are very close to us, which know our reality, and we can kind of, they support us very, very, very well. And so I think it's a kind of, it's a building process, you know. It's we want to get these people somehow represented or replicated around the Latin America, closer to us, you know. And that's it. I think this is what's we're going through.
Arturo?
Okay, I don't know if I should start again. So, okay, so one of the things that Pramod mentions usually is that, you know, when implementing DPIs, there's always someone who wins and someone who loses, right? So I'm wondering if there's, you know, we're not anticipating those who lose or who will lose. And my question for the panelists is if you can just think out loud in terms of someone who would lose or is losing because of DPIs, and how can we sort of preempt the reaction or at least strategize about how to deal with them?
I can take it because, yeah, so I think that in any transformation process, yes, there are winners and losers. And I understand there's an evolution on a market perspective that if you get out of a vendor locked in, that vendor that locks you in is going to lose eventually. It's a market this discussion, and that will happen. I think what Pramod referred that in last May was about the friction of the transformation of abandoning that idea that we are usually in government, you think about verticals and core systems and things like that, but our minds for the last 30,000 years are designed to think horizontal. And that idea of, because at the end of the day, you want that driver license and you don't care that you get your appointment on a citizen services, then you go to the DMV, you get it, and then you pay it, and that money goes to finance, right? You want your driving license. So that idea of process also, in the typical silo structure, it means giving away power. It's not technically losing money. It's just someone needs to give in your small, square meter of power. That means transforming that into something bigger that could be reusing a building block. That could be, for a government, for example, becoming a commodity that I'm like the front face for something, saying myself, I'm a government, but now, because I have an open network and an open API, any ecosystem can do transactions through the government platform, like from private sector, that missing power of representation is missed. And so that was maybe what Pramod was talking about, and that will eventually happen as we decentralize and create these networks.
Any other perspective? No. Any other question?
At the back.
Hi, thanks so much for the conversation. So it feels to me like someone who's relatively new to DPI, as if it's going through as if the ecosystem is going through the typical cycle where at the very beginning it's more difficult because no one really knows what's going on. Everyone has to build the underlying infrastructure. But then over time, there's more knowledge and the tools that enable it are more prevalent. I know that there are some tools that have only come about within the last few years. So my question is, do you think that for countries that are now starting out, that are kind of greenfield in DPI, that they would be able to move much more quickly, maybe even leapfrog other countries? Or do you think that really the underlying components that need to be built mean that they will end up taking a long time regardless?
I can answer.
I can try to answer.
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think it's very hard to say that a country that is starting now with the greenfield will advance much faster than a country that has started 10, 20 years ago. But what we know is that it's much easier. So when India started their DPI approach, that was nobody doing. They had to develop everything internally. And now there are a lot of things that are ready. There are a lot of open source solutions. There is a lot of private vendors that have the technology ready to be implemented. There's still much to be done in terms of regulation, but there are benchmarks there. So you don't have to start from scratch. I think being a first mover is very challenging in different ways. And for a country who is starting with a greenfield right now, it's important to take advantage of everything that is ready. And not only the technology that is ready, but the learnings as well, the processes, what mistakes were done, how you avoid those mistakes, what legislation needs to be in place, what was the culture change process in India. I think I had a lot of conversations and our conversations always go back to India and always go back to Pramod because he's such an amazing person. But one of the things he told me that was one of the most interesting things, we asked him, as how do you get different ministries to talk to each other in order to adopt the infrastructure transversally? And he said, they don't talk to each other. If you build something where they have to talk to each other, it's not going to scale up. So you build something that can be adopted independently. And this learning, I think for a country who's starting now, to start knowing those small things that make a huge difference, it has a big impact, no?
Go ahead, yeah.
Can I just build on top of what Julia said? There's a graveyard of greenfield projects that haven't been successful. It's not about technology at the end of the day, it's about designing things with the user or the human in the center. It's about what you're trying to solve beside technology. It doesn't matter at some point if it's a brownfield, greenfield, which two terms I hate with all my life, but things are complex. They will ever be. So the idea of having an approach of DPI is trying to have what's the minimal building block I can do to move forward and solve this problem that could be designed for scale and could be reused for other things. You can do it in a greenfield scenario, and you can take countries like, Ukraine or Estonia that they did it by need, not because that they didn't design it, they were forced to do it, You get other countries with 200, 500, 900 years of history that they were forced. For example, Arturo was telling this morning about, the justice program in the Spain government, a 1,000-year-old administration where in the pandemic they need to go to a e-court, idea to have the justice system keep operating, and now they basically digitalize a 1,000-year-old justice system. And justice was working pretty well in Spain, but they needed to do that transition fast during the pandemic. So it's about how you're using it and what's the value for the user at the end of the day. It's not just technology.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I'm not a panelist, but I'm a former civil servant, so I would like to add that if you're starting a DPI project, I would recommend to have the safety and inclusion approach, like a clear approach on that. And by that I mean, last week someone said during ONGA, if we're talking about DPI, it's because it's safe and inclusive. And if you're starting a project on DPI, I would recommend to not only have your map of actors in terms of who's the main stakeholder in civil society, or who's doing this, or who's doing that, but sometimes we lost the fact that from the IT ministry or the ICT ministry, we are the ones, we have the ownership of the tech adoption side. We know where the technologies, where the solutions, etc. But in many countries, the safety and inclusion approach is not in that ministry. The data protection approach is in another public agency, and having that mapped, I would say it's key if you want to have the tech adoption and the safety and inclusion approaches together. So it's not only leaving that to the civil society side, but also understanding who are the key actors in the public sector for each of these approaches. Any other question? Okay.
One quick question, right? In terms of actors and actually building on the safeguard. In Brazil, for PICs, more recently, they put together a multi-stakeholder council to develop accountability, but also to further develop the implementation of safeguards, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an example of implementation of a multi-stakeholder accountability approach. Do you guys think this is a way to go for all the DPIs, right? How in practice we involve different stakeholders on the design and implementation?
Yes, I guess that we are going to need to, for our GPIs or near GPIs, we will need to come up with some open governance structure, you know, and I mean, you use the best example, that is the Forum PIX, but I think that the other case that we have, a good case of DPIs, of digital platforms, they are not, I mean, as mature as PIX, for example, in terms of open governance, you know. And we will need to break some, I mean, traditions and some habits that, I mean, it involves some kind of sharing the power and decision power, and I mean, it's not that easy, but definitely it's necessary, I think. And I think it's one more milestone that we should reach in this journey, you know.
Yeah. Thank you all. Let's give them a big round of applause, please. And looking forward to seeing you all at the cocktail. Thank you for joining us.